Welcome to my video where I talk to you guys about what are CTEs in SQL. My name is Shashain and this is SQL Handbook. So to start this video off, I'm going to show you guys the contents of the video first, and then you guys can skip to wherever you like, or you can just follow through the whole thing. Basically, I'm going to open up with what are CTEs, and then obviously go into how we write them, what are the benefits of using them, and also some disadvantages, and some things to be mindful of as well in CTEs, such as semicolons and column names. How to define multiple CTEs and how we can reference multiple CTEs in the same query. I'm not going to go through recursive CTEs in this video. That is a whole nother topic. I feel like I can give a whole video just on that one topic. So I will do that in the future. Right, so now let's get into it. All right, so you see on the screen here, and just to let you guys know, I'm not going to be doing, these slides continuously. This is actually the last slide. After this, we're going to go straight into SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm going to show you guys real examples of CTEs in action. So just to start now with this slide, what are CTEs? I want you to think of a CTE as just a named query that we define using a with clause. That's really essentially what a CTE is, or what a common table expression is. And these named queries, they are representing relational tables, right? Now, here, for example, is how we define a CTE. So I have in this little box over here, a with clause and the CTE name. You can give whatever name you like, and then you write as, and then you open two brackets, and then there's two main structures with a CTE, the inner query and the outer query. At the very minimum, you need to have this kind of setup. Now, this inner query is really what we refer to as a common table expression, or a CTE. So this inner query, we give it a name, whatever you like, something meaningful, and then that inner query result set, you can think of it as a table. We can query that table in the outer query. That's why I say these are name queries that represent tables. So now that's the very skeleton of what a CTE is. Now we're going to go into SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm going to show you guys some examples of CTEs in action. Right, here we have SQL Server Management Studio. I'm just going to move myself into this corner over here. So this is my local instance. The data I'm going to use is very simple, it's very small data. It's just to showcase the examples and teach you guys what CTEs are. So I want to first start off by actually writing a CTE to answer a small problem, just so you guys can see my thought process of how you actually write a CTE. Here I have given myself a task. Look at the orders table and give me the customer IDs that have spent more than $1,000 in total. All right, let's look at the orders table over here. So we got order ID, customer ID, order amount, order date, and product ID. Realistically, in this scenario, we're only curious about the customer ID and the order amount. So now all I want is the customer ID, because we're just trying to get the list of customer IDs that have spent more than $1,000 in total. Okay, cool. So then customer ID, and we also want, let me write over here, the order amount, but we want the sum of the order amount, because we want to find, the total amount a customer has spent in the lifetime of this business. And we want to find out if it's which ones have more than $1,000. So sum of order amount, like that, and we'll give it a meaningful column name. So we'll write down a total spent for this column, total spent, right? So sum of order amount is, we're going to call it total spent. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have to group by customer ID, because we want to find out the total spent per customer. So we're going to group by customer ID. Now if I run this, we get the total spent per customer in this company. Now, simply I can just put a having clause and just write having total spent or some order amount more than 1,000, and we'll solve the entire problem. But we don't want to do that, because I actually want to show you guys how to use a CTE to solve this, just for demonstration purposes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat this as my inner query. So that means I'm going to have to write the with clause outside. I'm going to have to give it a meaningful name. So I'm going to write customer total spending. That's the CTE name I've given, something meaningful. And then I write as, and I open up some brackets like this. And I'm going to just going to space this out a bit, just for it to be a bit more easy to read. So now this is how I've started writing my CTE. I've started with the inner query, and then I've given that inner query a name, customer total spending. Now I can treat this as a table and just simply write in the outer query, select star from customer total spending. Over here. Now if I run this, I get the same result set back, because now I can treat this inner query as a table. That's why I can just use the CTE name from the CTE over here and just query it. But now I want to find out which customers have spent more than $1,000, right? So I'm going to write down select star from customer total spending where total spent is greater than 1,000. So in this scenario, I'm going to consider the customers that have spent literally more than $1,000. So if they spent equal to 1,000, I don't want it. So in this case, I don't want customer ID 102 because he or she just spent $1,000. I want the ones who spent more than that. So I've put this operator, and then if I run this query, I get the customers that have spent more than $1,000. Now this is how I write my CTEs and how I structure them in my head. I generally start with the inner query, and then I give it a name, and I go from there. Now something to be mindful of when you write CTEs is that you'll notice over here I've put a note that says all columns must have names, all column names must be unique, right? Now, why is that such an important note? Well, it's because it's a requirement when you write a CTE. So for example, over here, I have two columns, right? I have customer ID, and I also have sum order amount as total spent. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Shashin, doesn't all columns have a name by default? Well, yeah, you're right, but not every column is created from the table. So what do I mean? I mean like derived columns. So for example, over here, now customer ID is a default column that we have, and yeah, it's already got a name, obviously, so that's fine. But over here, we have a column called sum order amount. Now, order amount is a default column, but when we use an aggregator called sum, we're essentially creating a new column. Now, this new column doesn't have a name. It's an unnamed column. If I were not to put in total spent over here, and I ran this instead, you can see that I get an error message that says no column name was specified for column 2 of customer total spending, which relates to this column over here. So this is why column names are quite important when you write CTEs and why you can run into errors if you don't specify them. So if I were to uncomment this and run it, it's all fine. And also just to show you guys, column names must be unique. So obviously I can't write as total spent over here because if I try to run this, same thing comes up, right? The column total spent was specified multiple times, and that's also an error, right? Just to keep you guys mindful of that. So if you have derived columns in your CTE, you have to give it a new column name, right? For it to work. Okay, so that's how I write a CTE. Now we're going to move on to the benefits of using CTEs. What are the benefits of using CTEs? Over here, you can see I've listed 3 main benefits. They improve the readability of the code, they're reusable, and we can use them for recursion. When I say recursion, I'm talking about using it for analyzing hierarchy data. Again, I will go through that in a separate video by itself, just because I feel like it's a bit of a big topic. But anyways, in this video, we're going to go through the other aspects of CTEs. Now, in this example here, I want to show you guys what I mean by improved readability. Here, we have a subquery that I already created for you guys. It's nothing crazy. We have a customers table, and we're joining it to an orders and products table. In both those tables, we're trying to filter the records where order date is more than this date over here, right? Same date for both tables. Now, this is not a very complicated case, but let's say you have code that's in production and you have multiple programmers reading this code. It might be more readable for different people who have not written the code, they're new to the code, if you're written in a CTE format like this. Because now you can see over here, I've written a small inner query that's just select star from orders where order date is greater than this date, which is very easy to understand what it's doing. And we've given the CTE name called filtered orders, which also makes sense, right? For that result set. And then instead of having to repeat the code in the join clause, we already know it's already filtered one time. And then we can just write the outer query to execute against the CTE over here called filtered orders, right? So it's referenced over here. And now you can see that this CTE might be a bit more readable and a bit more easy to understand compared to the subquery over here, right? That's just a quick thing I just want to show you guys about readability. Now, this is a fairly simple example, but if there was, more joins and more complications, more filtering, you can do that all in one CTE and then just query against that one CTE in the outer query. So that's just a quick note on readability. Now I want to show you guys the different ways we can define column names in a CTE, because remember, column names are quite important, right? Otherwise the CTE will fail. So over here, is the inline method, which is what I did earlier, where I just written the column name as right next to the actual column that is unnamed, like the example over here. Now that's the inline method. There's also the external method. The external method is a bit different. Instead of writing as total spent over here like this, I've removed that, and next to the CTE name, I've opened up two brackets and I've put in two column names there, customer ID and total spent, right, to declare what this CTE is going to return. That's another way you can define your column names. There's no right or wrong way. It depends on what your business is doing. Like maybe you can check the CTEs that other developers have done. Typically people do the inline method because it's more widely known. Some people are not aware of the external method, but I just wanted to highlight both ways just so you guys are aware of it. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is semicolons with CTEs. I know this is not like a big deal because a lot of people might not even recognize semicolons being a big deal for CTEs, but I just want to flag this so you guys are aware, and if you guys come against this error, you'll know what's going on. So over here, I have a statement 1, which is a CTE. It's just, doing some work. And then we got a statement 2, which is a very simple query. It selects star from orders, right? Now I'm going to run this whole script. So both queries, I'm going to run them together, and it works just fine. I get a result set for statement 1. I get a result set for statement 2. So if I were to take this query, statement 2, and put it just above statement 1, realistically it should just work, right? There shouldn't be an error. So now if I run again statement 2 and then statement 1, the whole script, I get an error message saying incorrect syntax near customer total spending. Basically it just says, if this is intended to be a common table expression, which it is, you need to explicitly terminate the previous statement with a semicolon, right? So some database systems, now this is SQL Server, some other ones you can get away with this. They won't give you an error message, it'll go through, but some of them do also error out, and the error message might not be this detailed. So that's why I want to flag this. So how do you fix this and how do you make this work? It's very simple. Just put a semicolon at the end of statement 2, and if you run this whole thing, it works just fine, right? Now, as good practice, you should always have semicolons at the end of each statement. It's just a good habit to get into. So even things like this you can avoid naturally. Right, so now I want to show you guys how we can define multiple CTEs in the same query. So earlier we had one CTE shown to you guys. Here, for this example, you can see I still have the same CTE called customer total spending, and that's the query, that's the inner query over here. And we have another CTE called high spenders, and this is the inner query for that CTE, right? And the way we define it is basically after the inner query of the first CTE, I put a comma, and then I just give another name for my next CTE, and I put the as keyword, and then I write the inner query for that CTE, for that second CTE, which is high spenders. Now you can see the capability of CTEs where you can actually define multiple CTEs in the same query, and that can be interesting and useful for some people. Now, you can also notice that in the high spender CTE, what I've done is I've actually gone ahead and referenced the first CTE that I've created over here. So customer total spending in the from clause is created over here, right, initially. So this CTE, this result set, is referenced in the second CTE. So you can see how I can now reference result sets in CTEs, and that becomes quite useful. In fact, I'm going to show you my next example, which is talking about referencing multiple CTEs. Here I have a CTE again called customer total spending, the same one as earlier. And what I've done is I have taken that same CTE and referenced it twice in the outer query. So this is an outer query. It's just two queries that I'm combining with a union all statement over here. And both these queries have customer total spending in the from clause. So both queries on the outer query using the CTE that I've declared earlier. So this is also another interesting capability of CTEs and why they're useful. Now, something to keep in mind when you're writing CTEs is that they're not physically materialized. And what do I mean by that? Well, they're not stored anywhere in the database. Like, for example, a temp table, when you create a temp table, that data is stored in the database. Whereas when you create something like a CTE, it's not. It will always be executed at runtime. So this result set of this CTE is not stored anywhere in the database. It's always derived at runtime. So whenever I run this query, this result set is always calculated by the database engine. And that can be a bad thing because sometimes you might have a complicated CTE that's doing a lot of complicated joins and stuff, and you might be referencing it multiple times. And each time you reference it, it's been executed. That can be performance degrading for your system. So in that case, maybe you want to go with the temp table. I will go through those kind of performance considerations in another video, but it's something to keep you mindful of, that CTEs don't physically materialize. So I hope this video was useful for you guys to understand in a very basic way what CTEs are and what they can do and how to write them, and how, you know, someone would think to write them, like start with the inner query and then expand out. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. This is my first YouTube video, so yeah, I guess like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.